Hello, guys. This is Lydia Wente, the lifestyle coach, and I am so excited for our interview today. We have Summer Innanen on the show, and I just want to tell you a little bit about how she came into my life and then introduce her. And then we're just going to have this cool discussion and excited to hear about just her philosophy. And I think it's so important for our community. So, I mean, as you know, with this, we're bridging the gap between what we know and what we do. And especially with, binge eating and bulimia, emotional eating, all these sorts of things, the philosophies that we work on here is to have that sort of freedom in our lives. But then, hey, you stop binging and you've got the rest of your life. So I know with me, although I'm free of binge eating, there are just changes that happen, with any sort of change in our life. So everyone's journey is a little different, but I know when I stopped binge eating, my eating disorder was keeping me at this very unhealthy sort of weight and body fat percentage for me. I'm more of like an earthy, natural shape naturally. And when I was restricting calories and, doing all those sorts of, recovery from binge eating sort of things, I was thinner. And so when I started eating normally and just living a normal life, I went back to more of a normal shape, which was bigger than I was when I was suffering in that cycle. And it wasn't easy for me. Like, really, I remember I would just sit sometimes and just like cry because I was just so sad and stressed about the extra fat on my body that didn't used to be there. And I couldn't get away from it. I would just sit and it was just part of me. And it was such a source of stress. And then I found Fearless Rebel Radio, and that is Summer's podcast. And it would just totally changed my life. Like, I can honestly say, like, I'm okay. Like, I don't get stressed out about my size and my natural shape. And it's one of those things that I thought was impossible to feel okay about. And through her guidance and, the help that she gives people, her amazing book, it has made a huge difference. So with all of us who are on our journey to, have freedom from food shoes, your body might change. And that's totally okay. And Summer's going to give you some good tools today to kind of work through that transition. So I want to introduce her a little bit. So Summer Innanen is a body image coach, and she helps women to stop living behind the numbers on their scales. She helps women all over the world ditch their diet demons and amp up their confidence through her private and group coaching. You can go to summerinnanen.com to find out more about that. And I will include all of this in a blog post and in the show notes. So don't worry about frantically taking notes. Just giving you a broad strokes right now. So she's the best-selling author of the Body Image Remix and Embrace Your Body and Unleash the Fierce Confident Woman Within, and creator of the 21-Step Body Image Remix, a life-changing 21-day program that helps women build unabashed body confidence. Oh, yes. And she's also the host of Fearless Rebel Radio, the one that I found that changed my life, a podcast dedicated to empowering women to live life on their own terms, and has been featured in several publications, including the Huffington Post and Beautiful Magazine. You can also get her free Rock Your Body training, and I'll put the link to that. So without further ado, so excited to chat with Summer Innanen. Summer, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. And I didn't realize I was such an influence in your story. So that was really lovely to hear. And I'm so grateful for people like yourself that found my message and want to share it. So that's amazing. So thank you. And thank you for having me here.
Yes, well, thank you for being on. And I would just love, because some people are familiar with you, some people aren't yet. So I would love to just start with, let's talk a little bit about your personal story. I would love to hear, or for people to hear, where you came from, kind of your own story, and how you came upon this own transformation in your life of body acceptance. So will you tell us a little bit just about your personal story?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, for those that have heard it, they've probably heard me say it a million times, but, my story is much like everybody else's in that, not everybody, but a lot of women in that, I don't remember a time when I felt comfortable in my own skin. As a kid, I don't remember feeling comfortable in my body. I was teased relentlessly for my body, and I was always really super self-conscious. I was always like last place in gym class and like never on the sports teams, and like would rather sit in the corner with my coloring books, and just never really felt confident or comfortable. And I internalized a lot of body shame at a young age, particularly because of, the culture that we live in, the messages that we receive, and also just because I was really like made fun of a lot for my body. And so the only way that I kind of understood how to fix the shame, like to make it go away, was to change my body. Like I thought that would protect me. And so I entered into dieting, I don't know, around like 12 or 13 years old. My mom was always like a chronic dieter. She used to take me to like her Weight Watchers meetings, and, like we weren't allowed any sugar in the house at all, except for on certain occasions, in which case we could eat as much as we wanted. So I kind of almost like learned binge eating as a child as like this normal behavior. And so anyways, I started to like be conscious of my food, I guess, which, to me, when I'm looking back on it now, was really like my first experience with dieting when I was about 13 years old. And, as soon as I would like lose a little bit of weight, like people would notice. And that validation was like the greatest feeling I ever had. And so, of course, I wanted more of it. And so that sort of, slowly over time, I started to diet more and get into exercising. And it really, for me, didn't become more of a problem until I was in like my 20s. And I really, exercise was always kind of my thing. And so like, I really was like an exercise addict. And that, and so that really like drove me into a bit of like unhealthy behavior and an unhealthy relationship with exercise. And then I got into the paleo diet because I still wanted to lose weight. Like I basically was on this like lifelong quest to like lose the weight once and for all. And paleo was really the catalyst that kind of set me down probably the most like destructive and disordered road for me. And that's not to say that it was like the diet itself, but it was just like the headspace that I was in during that time, and the extent to which I took like this like quote unquote healthy eating plan. And it got to the point where I was like really restricting food and really over exercising. And, I would last on these patterns for like a few weeks. And then like, as you know, when you restrict, you respond, your body fights back, and you binge. So I would, just like go through these like ebbs and flows where I was like super strict with my diet, and then, blow it all up. And so my body weight was kind of continually fluctuating. But even when I was at my thinnest, I was still unhappy. Like that was not enough for me. And I remember like sitting at my desk, and I was, spending like 30 minutes inputting all of my food into, I can't remember. I think it was MyFitnessPal or something. No, it wasn't MyFitness. It was before MyFitnessPal, something else. Anyways, and I had like an Excel spreadsheet and stuff. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, how am I supposed to keep this up? Like, I'm not even where I want to be. And like, how am I supposed to continue this? Like, I can't continue this. But I kept continuing it, and I kept like doing more restrictive things. And slowly my body started to, react, and it started to, my weight started to creep back on, like my energy levels started to plummet. I had lost my period a while before that, which didn't really concern me at the time. My health just didn't feel like, something just didn't feel quite right. So I finally went to see a naturopath, and I actually went to see her because I was gaining weight, and that was my biggest concern, because that's all I cared about. Like that's all I cared about was my weight. She told me that my hormone levels were the same as like a postmenopausal woman. And that was really like my major wake up call, because she told me that I had to start eating more, and particularly carbohydrates. And I thought my diet was perfect, because I was like, I was a nutritionist at the time and I thought my diet was perfect. And so I was shocked to kind of hear this person like tell me that my diet wasn't perfect and that perhaps it was actually contributing to some of the issues that I had. But the real wake up call for me was the fact that I started to cry because she told me I had to eat more and stop exercising so much. That's why I was upset, not because of the fact that I had hormone levels of a postmenopausal woman and like she was really concerned about my health. It was the fact that she was taking away like this piece that I was so addicted and attached to. And that was when I was kind of like, what the hell am I doing? Like, what am I doing to myself here? Like, I'm upset because she's telling me I can't go to CrossFit and not because like my health is is deteriorating. And so that was when I sort of just was like, we need a radical change here. Like, I think I actually have, like some disordered behaviors. I honestly had no idea that what I was doing was disordered. I really didn't. I thought I was healthy. I thought I was doing what everyone else was doing. Because in a lot of ways you can go on the internet and you can find people who are supporting that behavior. So, disordered habits are really something that are kind of like normalized in our culture. And so I really had no idea. And so that's when I was like, all right, I started to read some stuff like Janine Roth and like some other books and realized like kind of this idea of like body acceptance was kind of at the root of like this behavior around food. And I was at an age where I was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I'm so sick of this. Like, I'm trying to fix my self-esteem and like the way I feel about my body with food. And like, clearly it's not working. For 20 years, I've been doing this. So it's not working. Like, we need to try something totally different. And so that's really like when I just decided to, I'm going to accept my body and really work on the body image piece and really work on what was going on inside my head and my relationship with food, my relationship with myself and how I thought about myself. And now I help other women to do the same, and to really help them feel amazing in the body they have and know that like their perfect body is the one they're already in. Because, like you said, I know you mentioned like you had to gain some weight in your journey. And similarly, I had to go through that experience, which is really hard because you're in such a fragile state of mind when that happens. But now like I can tell you, like I could care less about what my body looks like. I could care less if my body weight goes up or down. I eat what I want when I want it. And I feel just like so comfortable and empowered and free. And to me, that's what loving your body is. At least that's what it feels like to me. And so that's kind of my story and where I am now.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. And I know that even just, and I've heard your stuff, but just hearing your story, like it really impacts me emotionally. And I feel like a lot of people watching will be able to relate to that. A couple of things that you mentioned, Summer, that I just love is kind of this idea that, you were talking about, you thought that you could kind of avoid, pain or the shame or whatever by changing your body. I'm a huge Brene Brown fan. Awesome. And I love her definition of perfectionism, where she talks about like if this idea that if you do everything perfect, that you can avoid pain. And
yes, totally.
Yeah. And I really remember that feeling of, like I'll do what I need to. I'll do the work, because if I have this perfect body, then people will think that I'm beautiful and I'll avoid pain and people will see my value and people will see how hardworking I am. Because how on earth can you have a stomach like that if you don't work super hard? Like, I had all these sorts of things attached to this idea that you can avoid pain. And then you were talking about how, you weren't happy with your body. Like, weighing less didn't make you happy. And I think that that's such a huge thing around the weight loss culture and around this momentum, is the idea that like this will make you happy. Like, we all imagine ourselves like, however many pounds down, and that we'll have happiness from that. And I can attest to, when I was 20 pounds lighter, I remember thinking like, man, I'm so dissatisfied with my body. Like, I'm less satisfied being thinner than I was being bigger, and just not thinking about it as much. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I love that. So I'm just checking my notes here. I would love for you to just give us just maybe a quick little like maybe a few steps or whatever, I would love for people to go and get your book and like read more in depth. But tell us a little bit about that process of accepting your body. Like what sorts of things can people move toward or start doing if they're dissatisfied with where they're at right now to kind of improve their body image or their feeling toward themselves? Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I think like, I mean, it can seem like so far-fetched. Like, if you think about like this idea of like, quote unquote, like loving your body. And I use that in quotes because I think it's kind of a vague concept. And especially like if you hate yourself, like the idea of even like loving yourself can just feel like impossible. And so I think the first thing is to really just like understand that that's like such a huge leap. And so there's no way to kind of shortcut it. And that the best thing to do is to really start to move along the spectrum gradually and to not expect instant gratification. Like most women who have body image issues come with like a dieting PTSD, I'll call it, like dieting PTSD. And so you kind of expect instant gratification, like you're used to like doing something and then feeling like a different way in a short period of time. And so I just, I think it's really important to mention up front that it doesn't happen that way. And it's like really full of, like ups and downs. And it's just this continual process that takes patience and persistence and fumbles. And as long as you keep going, like you'll ultimately like continue to feel better and better. But I think it's important to sort of set realistic expectations and just try to come to a place of like body neutrality first, where you just can kind of look at yourself in a non-exaggerated, balanced way and just be like, okay, like I may not like my stomach or I may not like my thighs and they may make me feel ashamed, but it's okay. Like, it's just that, like that's it. So trying to really just take the emotion out of it. Cause we tend to like look at one thing and that becomes like this whole it becomes our world, right? Like my thighs were my world. Like that was like, my thighs dictated my happiness in life. And so if we can kind of just be able to make your first step to get to a place where you can just look at it. And even if you don't like parts of your body, just be like, okay, well, this is what it is. I feel like that's like a more realistic first step and a first place to go. In terms of how to actually get there, there's like some really basic things that I talk about that a lot of women maybe have already done, which is awesome, but I find a lot of women haven't. And that is, you want to get rid of anything that you've like hinged your happiness on, that you've hinged your self-worth on. So external things like your scale, like every time you step on your scale, if it's either making you feel terrible or it's making you feel good, like you've essentially put your body image conditional on something else, on this external thing. And we want our body image to be unconditional. Like we want our body love to be unconditional. And so you want to look at anything that you've like put conditions on. And so some tangible ones are your scale. So getting rid of your scale, like I really get rid of it. Like there's no need for it. It's just, if like, be honest with yourself. How is that really contributing to you feeling better about yourself? Other than the days that you step on and it maybe goes down a little bit, which are like few and far between. But even then, like you've basically put your happiness and your self-esteem like contingent on like this piece of metal, which is crazy. So get rid of the scale. Some other external things, like anything that's really creating this message in your mind that thin equals happy and successful and sexy and fat equals bad, like anything that's contributing to that, get rid of it, because that's clearly not going to help the new beliefs that you want moving forward. Like all of our body image is really the result of beliefs that we have and the emotional connection we have to these beliefs. And for the most part, that's this belief that like thin is like the ultimate thing you can be in life. And so anything that's contributing to that, from, social media, the TV you watch, the media, that like magazines, books that you're reading, like self-help stuff, like anything that's kind of like continuing to put this into your mind that thin equals better, you want to get rid of. And another tangible one would be like the clothes in your closet. You know, like if you open your closet and you've got these jeans that like you're like the jeans that you want to fit into, or clothes that, you know, are like your skinny clothes or whatever, get rid of them. Like, why are you keeping those around? Like anything that's kind of keeping this thin fantasy alive for you is stuff that you have to, you know, get rid of. Like those are like some really basic things that women can do. And then conversely, just I'll mention on the media side, you know, obviously you want to get rid of the stuff that's perpetuating the thin ideal. And this is nothing against thinness by any means. It's just that's kind of, you know, the way that I'll describe it, because that's what women really desire, who have these body image issues. Not everyone. I no longer desire that, but to also like buy into new beliefs, you know, like to expose yourself to body positivity and body diversity and you know, health at every size, and to really start to create new emotional connections to new beliefs that are going to be more supportive of body acceptance, which are like all bodies are beautiful, all bodies can be sexy and successful and healthy and happy, and, you know, and fit and whatever else. Like you want to buy into those beliefs, and in order to do that, you have to expose yourself to those messages and create new pathways in your brain that are going to actually change those beliefs. So those are a few of the very basic things that I have women do.
Thank you. That is so helpful. And I know, like, I remember when I got rid of like my skinny jeans, you know what I mean? It's like the things that I have to do in my life to fit into these make me insane and a binge eater.
Yeah, totally.
It's worth it to throw them away. But I know that some things come up. I know they came up for me. I know they'll probably come up for a lot of our viewers. It's a scary thing. Like when you want to be thin so badly, and when you attach so much to that, the idea of not like giving up on that idea, I know can be really scary. So I would love for you to speak to, I know that one thing that came up for me is like, okay, yes, I'm miserable with how my body is, but if I'm okay with how my body is, then my body won't change. And if my body doesn't change, then my life will be horrible because I'm not okay with this body. So speak a bit to that, because I think there are so many kind of myths that our minds pop up for us. So, I mean, have you heard that sort of like message and idea from other people as well? And like, how would you address somebody who's like, but I can't accept my body because I want my body to change?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, always. I mean, that was my biggest fear. I thought I was going to like never stop gaining weight, which, you know, at the time in my mind was like the worst thing in the world, which now you know, is not the worst thing in the world at all. Like weight is just this, you know, it's nothing. It's just this thing. There's no emotional connection to it for me anymore. But that's what I thought. I thought I would never stop eating. I thought I would live on banana cake. I thought I would feel even more shame. I thought my friends and family would think I was like perceive me as a failure. I thought people would judge me. I thought I wouldn't be able to like wear same clothes anymore. I thought I would hate shopping. But if I looked at it, I was already like all of those things, like, you know? And so I had to prove myself wrong. Like you have to prove yourself wrong. But I think it's really easy to like look at it and get connected to like this fear, you know, like this fear of like, oh my God, what's going to happen? And like, we totally blow it up and exaggerate it in our minds. And so I think it's really important to just like, honestly take it day by day, like moment by moment. And be really grounded and mindful of like, what story am I telling myself? Like what assumptions am I making versus like, what am I actually just doing and experiencing in this moment? And know that like, yeah, there's a lot of emotional stuff that comes up when you do this work. So I do encourage people to like, get support. Like don't do like, this is big stuff. Like I certainly didn't do it on my own, like by any means, you know? And so I think that, you know, like women invest so much money in like dieting and superfoods and gym memberships and personal trainers. But like, when it comes to like giving that stuff up, it's like the idea of like investing money in like self-improvement and maybe working with a therapist or a coach, like for some reason that seems like hard. And so I encourage women to get help, like work with a therapist, work with a coach, like invest in that side of it to make it easier. Surround yourself with people who are going to be like really, really supportive of it, and know that fear is part of this process. Like the whole reason why you're like clinging to this like ideal body that you want is to protect you. Like you said, like it's to protect you, and it's like, it's going to shield you and make your life happy. And so you're breaking down that barrier. And of course it's going to be fearful and scary. And so I think kind of accepting that there's going to be fear, and really seeing yourself as like a fighter, and you're going to do this, and getting people to support you as that fighter in your own life is going to, really helps to work through some of that stuff. And the only way that you can trust that everything will be okay is to test it for yourself and see. And that it takes a long time, like years, I would say. So like this expectation that like, you know, you're going to be okay after a month, or everything's going to be like, you're going to feel amazing in your body all the time. Like, that's not true at all. Like, again, that's kind of this idea that like, accepting your body is also going to be that protection, or like that perfectionism kind of frame of mind that you were talking about earlier. No, like you can have a positive body image and feel amazing about yourself, but like that doesn't protect you from ever having sad days or angry days, or like having a job that you don't like, or having people pass away in your life, or any of that stuff. It's kind of like, you know, also just being realistic that like, having good body image also isn't like the answer to just protecting yourself and having this like eternal happiness. Like it's just an emotional burden that you can get rid of, so that you can focus your attention on all these other amazing things that you can do with your life. I don't know if that totally answered your question.
That was awesome. And I love that. And I mean, I preach the same thing about binge eating. Like, if you stop binge eating, like it doesn't get rid of your problems, but it's a lot easier to like live life without binge eating, and being okay with your body doesn't get rid of all your fears and your issues, but it means you don't have to spend all of this mental bandwidth just hating your body. And it's a really big deal. And I love the point you made of just like, you know, for us to think that, you know, we can protect ourselves. Like, realize people, like there is a myth that is built into our society that is amazing for businesses, because we will just keep on buying more and more stuff. So there's this promise of like, oh, get this thing and you'll be happy, or be this way and you'll be happy, or like buy these clothes and you'll be happy. And there's like this endless stuff that you can consume to try to give yourself this promise.
Yeah.
Isn't true, you know? So I love what you're saying about being patient with the process. And it really does. It takes time. And I love what you're saying about like, prove it to yourself. Like that is such a powerful, powerful thing. I know that when I decided to like not have food structure and food rules and food deprivation, I was so scared. Like I just really thought that I would just be this insane person. It was nice that I had the binge eating out of the way. But when I took away food rules, like I ate kind of like more, well, because I didn't have food rules, right? So like,
yeah, like you rebel.
Proving to yourself that you won't be a crazy person and just eat and eat until you die when you take away your food rules is a really nice thing, because that's a hard burden to be under. And I know that like I ate more of whatever here and there for a little while, but then I realized like I can trust myself. Like trusting yourself is such a big deal. Like to know that you're not just gonna, you know, go off the deep end. Like, oh, if I had no rules and I just ate whatever I wanted, oh, I just eat kind of healthy, fulfilling things throughout the day and I stop when I'm full. Like that testimony to yourself about yourself, and being able to know that you can love yourself at the size that you're at. Like I can look in the mirror now and be like, hey, I'm kind of curvy. That's pretty. Like that was not on my radar. And so proving that to ourselves is a beautiful thing. So I love, love, love that you brought that up. I would love to switch over to, in your book, you talk about this doppelganger idea,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like that inner voice. Will you tell us a little bit about like what that is? And then I'd love to have a little bit of a conversation, because I know that this concept will be really familiar to my viewers, just maybe different semantics. So tell us a little bit about this doppelganger idea.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, you know, it's the negative voice in our head, and it's the thing that, you know, it's that voice that tells us that we're, you know, not good enough or unattractive or gross or, you know, whatever else it says to us. And so, you know, doppelganger is just kind of like the cute name that I picked for it. But in a lot of other worlds, like in the life coaching world, like it's your inner critic. Like I know Ariana Huffington calls it your inner mean girl, I believe. Like you know, everyone kind of has their different word for it. I think Brene Brown has a different word for it too, but she might call it like your evil roommate or something. But
she calls it the gremlins.
Oh, the gremlins. Yeah. Like there's so many different words for it. So that's just my word for it. But like the overall concept of it is just, it's the negative voice in your head. And in the work that I do with women and in my own you know, personal journey, like really understanding this concept and working on this concept was probably the most important thing. And so, you know, if we think about, I can talk about it a lot. So there's a couple different things. One is that, like, if we think about this negative voice in our head, for a lot of women, it's like this continuous negative chatter. You know, like every time you look in the mirror, every time you put on clothes, like it's a continuous negative chatter. And if you almost think about that like a muscle, you are essentially strengthening that muscle every time that you're using that. And there's a lot of things that kind of feed that negative voice. And so I talked about those, like getting rid of the scale, getting rid of the clothes. Like if you think about these tangible things that sort of feed that negative voice, you want to get rid of those tangible things. But we also want to try and like not flex that muscle as much. Like it never goes away completely. And I can talk about how to manage it and like why it shows up. But the counter to it is really like our voice of compassion. And so that's the voice that's typically very underused. You know, often when we hear this negative voice, you'll hear people say, "Oh, just tell it to shut up. Like tell your mean girl to shut up." And it's like, that's not really helping to reduce the strength of that negative voice muscle, we'll call it. Like this is just kind of the metaphor I use for it. Using and strengthening your voice of compassion is the most important thing that we can do, and the strongest weapon to really counteract. And so that's one thing that I like really work on with women, is like strengthening that voice of compassion, because it's something that we've never really allowed ourselves to have. You know, we're so good at offering it to other people, like our friends when they're in distress, or if you have children, like, you know, you can offer it to your children or your pets in my case. But we never use it on ourselves. And so it's like this weak muscle. And so it's like, no wonder you're not kind to yourself, you know, like the fact is that you're always strengthening this negative voice. And so if you think about it, like almost like an exercise you have to do and work on really strengthening that voice of positive self-talk and that voice of compassion, that's one way to kind of, you know, work through it. But the doppelganger voice, you know, like I talk about this in the book, it's really our voice of protection. Like it's our internal safety mechanism. So it shows up to protect us, which can sound kind of confusing to some people. So like if I were to walk through an example of this, let's say I'm putting on an outfit and my doppelganger is like, "Oh my God, you're disgusting. You know, like, what are you wearing? You're unattractive, you're gross," like all this other stuff. If I were to stand there in that moment and think to myself, like, what is this really trying to protect me from? For me, that might be judgment, rejection, vulnerability, typically judgment and rejection in my case. But, you know, for women, it's like a lot of different things. So it's important to realize that it's showing up to try and protect you, because it doesn't want you to experience emotional discomfort. So as much as it's giving you emotional discomfort, its job is actually to protect you from emotional discomfort. And so it's important to kind of, ask yourself, like, why is this showing up for me? Like, what's its role here? And typically it's this manifestation of like this innocent piece of ourselves, like the little kid that got beat up or picked on. Like for me, it's a full-on manifestation of like the 10-year-old girl who got picked on for her body. Like, of course, that piece of me never wants to feel that way again. So it's going to do whatever it can to protect me from shame. And so it shows up as this voice that will say to me, like, don't wear that, you're unattractive, blah, 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 because it's trying to protect me from ever experiencing that emotional discomfort again. So if we can kind of like compassionately understand it, why it's showing up, and see it as almost like this protective mechanism and this innocent piece of ourselves, that helps us to like work through it in a different way instead of getting angry at it, thinking of it as evil, or telling it to shut up, because none of those things that work. It's like telling a teenager who's rebelling to shut up. Like, do you think that's going to help them? They're just going to like rule the roost even more. Like they're just going to like be even more angry. So responding to it with compassion is what we want to do. So that's really the concept. And I mean, that's a fundamental component of body image, because body image is really about our mindset. It's not about our body. It's about our mindset. It's about the way we talk to ourselves. It's about our beliefs. And so this like really understanding like this voice, where it's coming from, why it's trying to protect us, can help us better to respond to it, because we never get rid of it. Because anytime we're stepping outside of our comfort zone, it's going to show up. Like anytime we step outside of our comfort zone, it's going to show up, because it hates that. Like it wants to protect you. It doesn't want you to feel joy or self-actualization. And I should mention that a lot of this that I teach with clients and I learned came from one of my mentors, whose name is Tara Moore, and she wrote this book called Playing Big, and she talks about it a lot in her book. So I just want to like reference that for anyone that's curious, and like and she talks about it a ton in her work, and I found it to be just like a totally new way of thinking about it that was so helpful for me.
Yeah, that is beautiful. Do you guys see this? Like this is the stuff. Like these are just the neuroscience principles that we talk about as well. So just to kind of tie a bow on it, for those of you, who have, seen my videos, those sorts of things, like, Summer, her language for it is the doppelganger. It's this voice that is really just trying to protect you, right? Like that's what we talk about as the chatter. It's that protective voice. It's that, primal part of your brain, that amygdala area that just like really wants to keep you safe and will say whatever it needs to, even if it's not true, to just try to protect you from pain. And as Summer talks about strengthening, that voice of compassion, like we a lot of times call it the you brain, that prefrontal cortex, like the logical part of your brain that knows that you're not disgusting because you're wearing that outfit, that like that part that like is confused by how you're beating yourself up, that kind of war in our brains. So I love the idea of strengthening that voice of compassion, or, the you brain. And like, if you guys have seen the Loving the Chatterbrain video, just like Summer said, like, you don't tell it to shut up, and you don't hate it, and you don't want to kill it and root it out of your brain. Like, you just realize that it's doing its job. Like, hey, thank you for trying to protect me. I appreciate it. I know, like, rejection is a scary thing. Thanks for letting me know. And now I'm going to wear this outfit and I'm going to go out and have a great time, because you have that voice of compassion. So I just love how this just all comes together. I feel like we hear it from so many different places. And I want to go back to what you said about getting support, Summer, because I think, we're both coaches. Like we know the value in, really having help through this journey. Summer has an amazing Facebook group that has been, I know, a huge benefit for me. But when I first heard Summer's podcast, like, I'm like, wow, there's this one amazing woman in Canada that's like, has this incredible message. I'm so glad there's this one person like preaching this. Cause I was so steeped in the world of like, just all of the obsession about, body and eating. And then you come to realize like, oh, it's not just Summer. Like you could like Google like body positive stuff, and like you can find all this. Like I didn't even know there was a community that supported this kind of thinking until I kind of opened my eyes to that. So know that there is so much support. There are so many amazing resources out there, including, I'll link in the show notes, Summer's book, her program. She just, I feel, adds so much value to this world, and it's made such a huge difference in my own life. So thank you. Thank you. Anything else that's kind of just on your mind, Summer, that you were thinking that you wanted to share with, the viewers here today? That's just before we wrap up, I wanted to give you the opportunity if there's anything else.
Yeah, I mean, I think just that, like, it's possible, like I mentioned, I listed off all the fears I had, and I'm not so sure I said that I proved them all wrong. So, it really is possible. It's possible, through my own journey, through women I've seen, through these amazing body positive communities that I've been introduced to, and friends through that it is possible to overcome this. And I know how it can feel so daunting and so huge, and know that you're not broken. You don't need to be fixed. The woman that you want to be, she's already you. You are her. You really, it's just about believing that for yourself. And I believe it for you, and I just want you to believe that for you. So my message to everyone is that it's so worth it, and that I know you can do it, and that you're not broken, you're not a problem, and you deserve it. So I feel like it's good to end on that note.
That's a beautiful note to end on. And I can certainly attest to that. That you brain had this idea, I think it's possible to be okay with our body. But I just had all this fear, and I didn't really think it was possible. But just start and sit with those feelings and be okay with the process, and throw out the instant gratification, just kind of go in that direction, be easy with it. And it's so possible. And a huge part of my own journey was the possibility that you gave me, Summer, with your information. So thank you for adding so much value to the world. Thank you for being on this video. I'm so excited for everyone to see it. More info about Summer, I'll be blogging about it. There will be stuff in the show notes. Also, want to remind you guys that the How to Stop Binge Eating and Be Successful with Everything Else ebook is at lydiawente.com. And in the body image section, I actually have a link in the ebook to Summer's book for more resources there. But you can kind of see how the principles of calling out the chatter help me with that process as well. So wanted to tie those things together. Thank you again so much for being on. And feel free to comment in the notes, what other questions you might have for either one of us, what other topics you'd like to see, kind of how this impacted you or your thoughts. We'd love to get some discussion going on this as well. So thank you again, Summer.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, Lydia Wente, the lifestyle coach, signing off, and mwah.